A stranger's request. Natalie Brooks had always prided herself on reading people. It was her greatest skill, honed over years of working in the peculiar business of human connections. But nothing had prepared her for the woman who walked into her office on that grey November afternoon. The office of Harmony Connections was tucked away on the 7th floor of a building most people passed without noticing. That was intentional. Their clients valued discretion above all else, and discretion was what Natalie delivered. She specialized in compatibility consulting, a polite term for something most people would find ethically questionable. She didn't match people who were looking for love. She created connections for people who'd given up looking. Victoria Ashford entered with the bearing of someone accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted. Her silver hair was styled immaculately. Her navy suit spoke of wealth without shouting it, and her jewelry was understated, yet clearly expensive. But it was her eyes that caught Natalie's attention, deep brown and filled with a mother's desperate worrying. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Victoria said, settling into the chair across from Natalie's desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a leather portfolio between them. Natalie offered a professional smile. "Your assistant mentioned it was urgent. How can I help you, Mrs. Ashford?" Victoria opened the portfolio and extracted a photograph. "This is my son, Damien." The man in the photo was striking in an understated way. Dark hair swept back from a face that was handsome but guarded, as if he'd learned to keep the world at arm's length. He stood alone at what appeared to be a charity gala, surrounded by people yet somehow isolated. His dark eyes held something Natalie recognized immediately because she saw it in her own mirror. A weariness born from too many disappointments. The billionaire's burden. Damien is 36 years old, Victoria continued, her voice catching slightly. He built a successful medical technology company from the ground up. He's brilliant, generous, and completely alone. She paused, gathering herself. He works 16-hour days, 7 days a week. He hasn't brought anyone to family dinner in 3 years. He barely smiles anymore. "Miss Brooks, I'm watching my son disappear into his work, and I don't know how to reach him." Natalie had heard similar stories before. Successful people who'd forgotten how to connect, who'd built empires, but lost themselves in the process. "What exactly are you hoping I can provide, Mrs. Ashford?" "I want you to help him remember what it feels like to care about something beyond quarterly reports and product launches." Victoria leaned forward, intensity blazing in her eyes. "I want him to open his heart again, even just a crack. I'm not asking you to marry him, Miss Brooks. I'm asking you to show him he's capable of feeling something real." Natalie should have declined. This particular request crossed lines she'd been careful to avoid. But something in Victoria's desperation culminated in a place Natalie usually kept locked away. She understood isolation. She understood building walls so high that no one could scale them. She'd spent her entire life perfecting the art of becoming whoever people needed her to be. "Tell me more about him." Natalie heard herself say. Building the profile of Victoria, pulled out a thick folder, relief evident on her face. "He's incredibly intelligent, but he doesn't flaunt it. He donates anonymously to medical research and children's hospitals. He loves classical architecture, collects first edition philosophy books, and used to play piano before he stopped making time for anything personal." Natalie took notes with practiced efficiency. "What about his relationship history?" Victoria's expression darkened. 5 years ago, he was engaged to a woman named Charlotte. She seemed perfect for him, charming, educated, genuinely interested in his work. They were together for 2 years. She paused, pain crossing her features. 3 weeks before the wedding, he discovered she'd been feeding information about his company to a competitor. She'd been using him the entire time. "That's why he's so guarded," Natalie murmured, more to herself than Victoria. "He's convinced that anyone who shows interest only wants his money or his connections. He's forgotten that genuine affection exists." Victoria's eyes met Natalie's. "But you could remind him. You could show him that not everyone has ulterior motives." The irony wasn't lost on Natalie. Victoria wanted her to prove that genuine connection existed by manufacturing one. It was twisted logic, but Natalie had long ago accepted that her profession thrived in moral grey areas. The decision: "I'll need complete access to his schedule, his interests, his routines," Natalie said. "Everything you can provide. This kind of work requires extensive research." Victoria nodded eagerly, pushing the folder across the desk. "Everything I could gather is here. His favorite restaurants, the charities he supports, his morning routine, the bookstores he visits. I've been documenting his life for months, hoping I'd find someone who could help." Natalie flipped through the folder. Victoria hadn't exaggerated. This was a comprehensive dossier that would make any intelligence agency proud. Damien Ashford ran every morning at 6:30 through Riverside Park. He bought coffee from the same cafe every weekday at 7:15. He spent Saturday afternoons browsing a used bookstore in the West Village. His life was structured, predictable, lonely. "My fees substantial," Natalie said, quoting a figure that made most people reconsider. "And I'll need at least 2 weeks for preparation before first contact. Money isn't a concern." Victoria wrote a check without hesitation, her hands steady now that hope had been offered. "Whatever you need, Miss Brooks. Just please help my son find his way back to living instead of just existing." After Victoria left, Natalie sat alone in the quiet office, staring at Damien Ashford's photograph. There was something about his eyes, something wounded and wary, that called to her. She'd been doing this work for 5 years, ever since she'd aged out of the foster system with nothing but sharp instincts and the talent for transformation. She'd never failed an assignment. She'd made dozens of people believe in love, or at least in the possibility of connection. But looking at Damien's photograph, Natalie felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not just professional interest in a challenging assignment, something more dangerous, a recognition. He was like her, damaged and defensive, existing behind carefully constructed walls. She closed the folder and made her decision. She would take the case. She would become exactly the woman Damien Ashford needed. She would make him believe in love again, even if she'd never believed in it herself. What Natalie didn't know, couldn't know, was that this assignment would be different. That manufactured connection would become devastatingly real. That in trying to help Damien open his heart, she'd crack open her own. The game was about to begin, and neither of them would emerge unchanged. The art of research for 2 weeks. Natalie became a student of Damien Ashford's life. She studied him with the intensity of a detective tracking a suspect, learning every detail, every pattern, every preference. Her small apartment transformed into a war room, walls covered with notes, timelines, and photographs documenting his routines. She discovered that Damien valued authenticity above everything else. In interviews, he spoke about integrity and honesty with a conviction that made Natalie's stomach twist with guilt. He'd built his company, Meditech Solutions, on the principle of transparent innovation. He believed technology should serve humanity, not profit margins. He'd rejected multiple buyout offers that would have made him exponentially wealthier because the acquiring companies didn't share his values. Natalie learned that he loved Baroque architecture and spent occasional Sunday mornings photographing old buildings in Brooklyn. He read philosophy, particularly existentialist writers like Camus and Sartre. He preferred small jazz venues over crowded clubs, independent films over blockbusters, conversations about ideas over small talk about weather. She studied his body language in video footage from conferences and charity events. The way he stood slightly apart from groups, hands often in pockets. The way he listened intently when others spoke, giving them his full attention. The way his smile rarely reached his eyes, as if he'd forgotten how to feel genuine joy. By the end of week 2, Natalie knew Damien Ashford better than most people knew their closest friends. She knew what would attract him, what would intrigue him, what would make him lower his defenses. Now came the delicate work of making their meeting seem like fate. The first encounter bookstore was called Henderson's, a cramped 3-story building in the West Village that smelled like old paper and possibility. Damien visited every Saturday between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, always browsing the philosophy section On the second floor, Natalie arrived at 1:30, dressed in comfortable jeans and a forest green sweater, natural makeup, her chestnut hair loose around her shoulders, reading glasses perched on her nose. Even though her vision was perfect, she looked like someone who belonged here. Someone who valued books over fashion, ideas over appearances. She positioned herself in the philosophy section with a worn copy of The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus. It was calculated, yes, but also genuine. She'd actually read it 3 times while preparing for this assignment, and found herself genuinely moved by Camus's arguments about finding meaning in absurdity. At 2:15, she sensed rather than saw Damien enter the section. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge him, just turned a page and continued reading, completely absorbed in the text. She felt him pause nearby, his presence a warm disturbance in her peripheral vision. He was browsing the Sartre section, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and woody. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Natalie remained focused on her book, occasionally making small notes in the margins with a pencil. She'd learned that men like Damien noticed women who were genuinely engaged with ideas, not those who obviously sought attention. "That's a bold book for a Saturday afternoon." His voice came from behind her, deeper and warmer than she'd expected from recordings. Natalie looked up, letting surprise register on her face, as if she hadn't orchestrated this exact moment. "I find Camus oddly uplifting on weekends. The absurdity of existence feels more manageable when you're not also dealing with work stress." A genuine connection. Damien's lips curved into an almost smile, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. Most people find him depressing. Most people miss the point. Natalie closed the book, marking her page carefully. He's not saying life is meaningless. He's saying we create our own meaning despite the absurdity. That's actually quite hopeful. Something shifted in Damien's dark eyes, a spark of interest that felt authentic. "You've clearly thought about this deeply, haven't you?" She tilted her head. "Isn't that why you're here in the philosophy section, instead of browsing bestsellers downstairs?" He laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprised and rich. "Fair point." He gestured to the book in his hand, a collection of Sartre's essays. "I come here to remember that there are questions bigger than profit margins and product launches." "What do you do?" Natalie asked, though she knew every detail of his career. "I run a medical technology company. We develop devices that make healthcare more accessible in underserved communities," he said it matter-of-factly, without pride or pretension. "What about you?" "I work in consulting," Natalie said, keeping it vague as she'd practiced, helping organizations improve their communication strategies. It pays the bills and occasionally feels meaningful. Damien studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She had the unsettling feeling he was seeing past her performance to something deeper. "I'm Damien," he said, extending his hand. Natalie, her hand slipped into his, warm and steady. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system that she told herself was just good acting. They stood there in the narrow aisle between shelves, still holding hands a moment longer than necessary. When they finally broke contact, Damien seemed reluctant to leave. "Do you come here often?" He winced immediately. "Sorry, that sounded like a terrible pickup line." Natalie laughed genuinely. "It did, but I'll forgive you since you have excellent taste in philosophy. I just moved to the neighborhood, actually. Fresh start and all that." "Fresh starts." Damien's expression grew thoughtful. "Those are either the best decision you'll ever make or the most terrifying." "Why not both?" Natalie replied. "The best decisions usually are terrifying." He looked at her like she'd said something profound instead of just philosophical small talk. "I should let you get back to your reading," he said, though his body language suggested he didn't want to leave. "But maybe I'll see you here again." "Maybe," Natalie said, picking up her book. "If the universe is feeling generous." The careful dance over the following 3 weeks. Natalie became a fixture in Damien's world through carefully orchestrated accidents. She showed up at Henderson's bookstore twice more, always absorbed in reading, always leaving before he could suggest they spend more time together. She wanted him curious, interested, chasing. She accidentally ended up at the same art gallery he visited one Thursday evening, a small space in Chelsea featuring contemporary abstract works. She stood before a large canvas of swirling blues and greys, genuinely moved by the chaotic beauty. "You have good taste." Damien's voice came from behind her. Natalie turned, letting pleasant surprise cross her features. "Damien, I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same." He moved to stand beside her, both of them facing the painting. "What do you see in it?" She considered the question seriously. Order emerging from chaos, or maybe chaos pretending to be order. "I'm not sure which is more honest." Damien was quiet for a long moment. "I think chaos is more honest. We spend so much energy constructing order, building systems and structures to make sense of things, but underneath, everything is chaos, random, unpredictable. That's a lonely way to see the world." Natalie said softly, "You say that like you don't feel the same way." His eyes met hers, searching. And here was the moment Natalie hadn't planned for. The moment when she could have deflected with charm and flirtation. Instead, she found herself saying, "I think we're all chaos pretending to be order. The pretending is what exhausts us." Damien stared at her like she'd revealed something essential about the universe. "Would you like to get coffee? Real coffee, not gallery wine." This was it. The first intentional invitation. The moment casual became purposeful. "I'd like that very much," Natalie said. Beyond the script fee, found a quiet cafe 3 blocks away, and talked for 2 hours. Natalie played her role perfectly, mirroring his body language, laughing at his dry humor, asking questions that made him feel heard. She revealed carefully selected truths about herself. The foster care system framed as something that made her resilient. Her consulting work kept deliberately vague. Her love of literature and philosophy, all things she knew he valued. But something unexpected happened during that conversation. She stopped performing. The questions she asked became genuinely curious, rather than strategically calculated. When he talked about his company's latest innovation, a portable ultrasound device for rural clinics, his passion was infectious. When he mentioned his sister's struggles with anxiety and how it inspired his work in mental health technology, Natalie felt genuine empathy. And when he admitted, quietly and almost embarrassed, that he hadn't had a real conversation like this in years, Natalie felt something crack in her carefully constructed walls. "Thank you," Damien said as they stood outside the cafe, the evening air cool around them. "For what?" "For seeing me." His voice was rough with emotion. "Not the company or the money or any of that. Just me." Natalie's throat tightened with guilt, because that was exactly what she wasn't doing. She was seeing the version of him she'd researched and analyzed. Or was she? In the past 2 hours, she'd glimpsed something her research hadn't captured. His genuine kindness, his self-deprecating humor, his vulnerability. "I'll see you again?" Damien asked, hopeful and uncertain. "Yes," Natalie said, meaning it more than she should. "I'd really like that." She walked away feeling the weight of what she'd started. This was supposed to be simple, make him feel connected, give him hope, complete the assignment. Instead, she was beginning to understand why Victoria had been so desperate. Damien Ashford wasn't just lonely. He was starving for real human connection, and Natalie was feeding him a beautiful lie. The worst part, she was starting to hunger for the same connection, and that hadn't been part of the plan at all. The deepening 6 weeks transformed everything. What began as calculated encounters evolved into something neither Natalie nor Damien could have anticipated. Their meetings became regular, intentional, eagerly awaited. Coffee dates stretched into dinners. Dinners extended into evening walks through the city. Every conversation peeled back another layer. Natalie told herself she was simply doing her job exceptionally well. But late at night in her apartment, staring at the research materials still covering her walls, she couldn't deny the truth. She was falling for him. Actually, genuinely falling for the man she'd been hired to manipulate. It terrified her. Damien introduced her to his world slowly, like someone sharing precious treasures. The jazz club in the East Village, where he went to think, tucked below street level, with exposed brick walls and musicians who played like they were baring their souls. The rooftop garden at his friend's apartment building, where he watched sunsets when the weight of work became too heavy. The tiny Italian restaurant run by a family that had known him since childhood. Each place he shared felt like trust being extended, like walls coming down brick by careful brick. The vulnerability was their ninth date, though neither called them that, when everything shifted. They'd gone to a small theater in Brooklyn to see an independent film about memory and loss. Afterward, walking along the waterfront with the Manhattan skyline glittering across the river, Damien stopped suddenly. "Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone?" His voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested the control might shatter. "Of course," Natalie said, her heart beginning to race. They sat on a bench facing the water. Damien stared at the lights reflecting on the dark surface, gathering courage, or perhaps just words. 5 years ago, I was engaged, he began. Her name was Charlotte. We met at a medical technology conference. She was brilliant, charming, interested in my work in a way that felt genuine. I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me, not just what I could provide. Natalie already knew this story from Victoria's briefing, but she listened as if hearing it for the first time, her hand finding his. We were together for 2 years. I trusted her completely, shared everything about my company, my plans, my dreams. His jaw tightened. 3 weeks before our wedding, my head of security discovered she'd been selling proprietary information to Vanguard Medical, our biggest competitor. Everything I'd told her in confidence, she'd monetized. "Damien, I'm so sorry," Natalie whispered, guilt churning in her stomach. The betrayal wasn't just professional, though that nearly destroyed my company. It was personal. She'd looked me in the eyes every single day and lied. Every "I love you," every intimate moment, every conversation about our future. It had all been theater. She was playing a role, and I was stupid enough to believe the performance. Natalie felt like she might be sick. This was exactly what she was doing to him. The parallel was devastating. "You weren't stupid," she managed. "You were trusting." "That's not the same thing." Damien turned to face her, his dark eyes haunted. "After that, I built walls. Massive, impenetrable walls. I told myself I'd rather be alone than vulnerable. I worked constantly because work couldn't betray me. Algorithms don't lie. Technology doesn't pretend." He reached up, cupped her face gently. "And then you walked into that bookstore, completely absorbed in camo, and something in those walls cracked." "Damien," Natalie started, but he continued, "You're different, Natalie. You don't ask about money or connections. You don't care about my company's valuation or my social status. You talk about ideas and meaning and the absurdity of existence." His thumb brushed her cheek. "With you, I feel like I can breathe again. Like maybe I was wrong to give up on genuine human connection." Natalie felt tears burning behind her eyes. Every word he spoke was a knife, cutting deeper, because he was so completely, devastatingly wrong about her. She was exactly like Charlotte. Worse than Charlotte, because at least Charlotte's motives had been professional greed. Natalie's were more insidious. She'd been hired by his own mother to manufacture these feelings. The moment of truth that wasn't "There's something I need to tell you," Natalie said, her voice shaking. Damien's expression grew concerned. "What is it?" She opened her mouth, the confession forming on her tongue. But before she could speak, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening with worrying. "It's the hospital," he said. "My mother." "I'm sorry, I have to take this," he answered, and Natalie watched his face drain of color. "I'll be right there," he said, standing abruptly. "Mom had a fall. She's at Presbyterian. I need to go." "I'll come with you," Natalie said immediately. "You don't have to." "I want to," and she meant it. Whatever guilt she carried, her concern for him in this moment was absolutely genuine. They took a cab to the hospital in tense silence, Damien's hand gripping hers like an anchor. In the emergency room, they found Victoria with a bruised face and her arm in a sling, but conscious and alert. "I'm fine. Stop looking at me like I'm dying," Victoria said, when she saw Damien's expression. Then her eyes landed on Natalie, and something complicated passed between them. Recognition, guilt, shared secrets. "This is Natalie," Damien said, his arm around Natalie's waist. "The woman I've been telling you about." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "It's lovely to meet you, dear. Damien has spoken about you quite a bit." The irony was excruciating. They stood there, the three of them, bound by different threads of deception and love and complicated intentions. The confession she couldn't make to Victoria was released with instructions to rest. Damien drove Natalie home. They sat in his car outside her building, neither wanting to leave the cocoon of shared space. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," Damien said. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to be there for you," Natalie said truthfully. He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in the dim light. "Natalie, I'm falling in love with you. I know it's fast. I know we should probably take this slower. But I need you to know, because I haven't felt this way since Charlotte, and it terrifies me. But it also makes me feel more alive than I have in 5 years." The words hung in the air between them, beautiful and devastating. "I'm falling for you too," Natalie whispered, and it was the most honest thing she'd said in weeks, maybe ever. Damien kissed her then, soft and tender, and full of unspoken promises. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should have told you earlier," he murmured. "You needed to know that I choose you, completely, without reservation." Natalie closed her eyes against the tears threatening to fall. "Damien, there's something, tomorrow," he interrupted gently. "Whatever you need to tell me tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to hold on to this feeling, this hope. Is that okay?" "No," Natalie thought. "It's not okay, because every moment I don't tell you the truth makes it worse." But she found herself nodding, postponing the inevitable confession one more night. "Tomorrow," she agreed, her voice thick with unshed tears. She watched him drive away, then climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, she collapsed against the door, sliding to the floor as sobs overtook her. She'd fallen in love with Damien Ashford, really, truly, devastatingly in love, and when he discovered the truth about how they'd met, about who she really was, and why she'd approached him, it would destroy him. It would destroy them both. Tomorrow, she'd tell him everything. Tomorrow, she'd face the consequences of her deception. Tomorrow, she'd lose the best thing that had ever happened to her. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself believe the beautiful lie, that love could be real even when it started with manipulation, that she deserved happiness even though she'd built it on deception, that maybe, somehow, the feelings they'd developed could survive the truth about how they'd begun. She was wrong, of course, but for one more night, she let herself hope. The morning after, Natalie woke with the weight of impending confession pressing against her chest like a stone. She'd barely slept, spending hours rehearsing different versions of the truth, searching for words that might soften the blow she was about to deliver. "Damien, we need to talk. Damien, there's something you should know. Damien, I haven't been honest with you about how we met. None of them felt adequate. None of them could possibly make this hurt less." She dressed simply, jeans and a soft grey sweater. No armor, no performance, just herself, stripped of all the careful construction she'd built around this relationship. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Victoria from late last night. Natalie had ignored them, unable to face the woman who'd hired her, unable to pretend everything was proceeding according to plan, because it wasn't. The plan had been to make Damien feel again, to open his heart, to remind him that connection was possible. Mission accomplished. He'd fallen completely, but so had she, and that catastrophic variable would now destroy everything. Natalie took the subway to Damien's penthouse in Tribeca, her hands shaking the entire ride. She'd called earlier, told him she needed to see him, that it was important. He'd sounded concerned, but welcoming, telling her to come over whenever she was ready. The doorman recognized her now, smiled warmly. "Good morning, Miss Brooks. Mr. Ashford is expecting you." She rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, watching her pale reflection in the mirrored walls. This was it, the end of everything beautiful they'd built together. The devastating discovery knocked on Damien's door, once, twice, no answer. Frowning, Natalie tried the handle. It opened, unlocked, which was unusual for Damien, who was meticulous about security. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. Damien. Her voice echoed in the hallway. Silence. Heavy, oppressive silence. She moved through the apartment, her heart beginning to race with something beyond nervousness. Something felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy with unspoken catastrophe. Then she saw it. The door to his study, half open, light spilling out into the dim hallway. Damien, she said again. Pushing the door wider, he sat in his desk chair, turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A glass of scotch dangled from his hand, the bottle on the desk beside him nearly empty. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it compulsively. His shirt was wrinkled, untucked, and when he turned to look at her, Natalie's breath caught in her throat. His eyes were red-rimmed, swollen, devastated. The expression on his face was one of such complete betrayal that she physically staggered backward. "Damien," she whispered, "what happened? When were you going to tell me?" His voice was flat, emotionless, which was somehow worse than anger. Natalie felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Tell you what, don't." The word came out sharp as a blade. "Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything." Her mouth went dry. "I don't understand. When were you going to tell me?" The explosion made her flinch. Damien surged to his feet, the scotch sloshing dangerously in his glass. "When were you going to tell me that this whole thing has been a setup? That you were hired to make me fall in love with you? That every conversation, every moment, every touch was choreographed?" Natalie felt like she'd been punched. "How did you? My mother." His laugh was bitter, broken. "She came here last night after you left the hospital. Couldn't sleep, couldn't live with the guilt anymore." He set the glass down with trembling hands. "She told me everything, Natalie, everything." The confrontation. Natalie's vision swam. Victoria had confessed, had taken away Natalie's chance to tell the truth on her own terms. But did that even matter now? The result was the same. Damien knew. "Please," Natalie said, moving toward him. "Please let me explain." "Explain what?" Damien's voice dropped to a whisper, and somehow that was infinitely worse than the shouting. "Explain how you researched me like I was a case study. How you engineered every accidental meeting. How you became exactly the woman I would fall for. It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" He moved closer, and she could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the barely contained anguish in every line of his body. "Tell me, Natalie, what was I to you? A project, a particularly challenging assignment. How much did she pay you to make the broken billionaire believe in love again?" "It started that way," Natalie admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But Damien, that's not what it became. I fell in love with you. Really, genuinely fell in love with you." "When?" The question was a knife. "When did you fall in love?" "After you'd already learned everything about me. After you'd already orchestrated our entire relationship from the first meeting." "How do I know any of it was real?" "The first time you told me about Charlotte," Natalie said desperately, "that night by the water. That's when I knew I was in trouble, because I wasn't playing a role anymore. I was just me, and you were just you, and everything became real." Damien stared at her, and she watched him try to believe, watched him want to believe, watched hope and doubt war across his face. "My mother came here in tears last night," he said quietly. "Told me she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd only wanted to help me, that she never meant for it to go this far, never meant for me to actually fall in love." His hand came up, hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her, but couldn't quite manage it. "She said you were a good person, that you genuinely cared about me. But how can I trust that? How can I trust anything about this? The impossible choice, because I came here to tell you the truth," Natalie said, grabbing his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "This morning, I was going to confess everything. I couldn't live with the lie anymore. Convenient timing, but his thumb stroked her cheek, betraying him. My mother confesses first. And suddenly you were planning to tell me all along. I swear I was. Last night in the car, I tried to tell you, but you said tomorrow. And I hated myself for waiting even one more night, because every moment I didn't tell you, the truth made it worse. Damien closed his eyes, his jaw working. The woman I fell in love with, did she ever exist? She's me. Natalie's voice cracked. She's who I really am. Everything I told you about foster care, about feeling alone, about building walls to survive, that was all true. The only lie was how we met. Everything else, everything that matters, that was real. The only lie, he pulled his hand away. The loss of contact like losing an anchor in a storm. Natalie, you constructed our entire relationship. You researched me like a thesis project and became exactly who I needed. How is that only anything? Because the person I became, who I really am. The words tore out of her. You want the truth? Here it is. I've spent my entire life playing roles, becoming what people needed, because that's how you survive when no one ever chose you for yourself. She was crying harder now, but she didn't care. This was it. The truth, raw and unfiltered and desperately honest. But with you, I stopped performing. I stopped adapting, because you saw me, the real me, and you loved her anyway. And that terrified me more than any deception ever could. The final break for a long moment, Damien just looked at her. She could see the war in his eyes, the desperate desire to forgive battling against the devastating betrayal. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, like he was physically fighting the urge to reach for her. I love you, Natalie whispered. I love you so much it's destroying me. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I broke something precious. But please, please believe that what we have is real. She watched something in him shift, watched the moment when he almost gave in, almost pulled her close and told her they'd figure it out together. She saw it in the softening of his eyes, the slight forward lean of his body. Then his phone buzzed on the desk. A reminder notification. Their dinner reservation for tonight at the Italian restaurant where they'd first said, I love you. The one they'd made a week ago when everything was still beautiful and uncomplicated. The reminder of all their plans, their future, their beautiful lie. Damien's expression hardened. Get out, he said. His voice dead, empty. Damien, get out. Natalie. He turned away from her, facing the window. I can't look at you right now. I can't hear your voice. I can't think straight with you here. Please just go. Let me stay, she begged. Let me explain everything. There's nothing to explain. He finally looked at her, and the coldness in his eyes made her stagger. You were hired to make me fall in love? Congratulations. Mission accomplished. Now leave. Natalie took a step toward him, desperate to fix this, to make him understand. Don't, he said, his voice breaking finally. Don't make this harder than it already is. Just go, please. She stood there, frozen, watching the man she loved shut down completely, watching walls slam back into place, higher and stronger than before, watching her future disintegrate. I'm sorry, she whispered one last time. I'm so sorry. Damien didn't respond, just turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid, his body language screaming for her to leave. Natalie walked out of his study, out of his apartment, into the elevator that felt like a descending coffin. She made it to the street before her legs gave out, collapsing onto the nearest bench. And then she broke. Completely, utterly, devastatingly broke. She'd known this ending was inevitable from the moment she accepted Victoria's money. That knowing and experiencing were different universes. She'd just lost the best thing that had ever happened to her. And she had no one to blame but herself. The aftermath 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Natalie moved through her days like a ghost, barely eating, barely sleeping, functioning on autopilot. She quit Harmony Connections immediately, sending her resignation via email at 3 in the morning when guilt wouldn't let her rest. She ignored Victoria's tearful phone calls, blocked every number connected to her old life. She needed to disappear, to become no one, to stop being the woman who destroyed Damien Ashford. Money became tight quickly. The salary from Harmony Connections had been substantial, and without it, rent was impossible. She found a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that didn't ask questions, took a job as a night clerk at a convenience store, anything to keep busy, anything to avoid thinking about what she'd lost. But late at night, when the store was empty and her mind had nothing to do but wonder, she remembered the way Damien smiled when he talked about helping people, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the way his voice sounded when he said, "I love you" for the first time, the way he'd looked at her in his study, broken and betrayed. Those memories hurt worse than anything she'd ever experienced. Meanwhile, across the city, Damien was falling apart in his own way. He threw himself into work with obsessive intensity, 20-hour days that left no room for thinking or feeling. His assistant grew worried. His board members exchanged concerned glances. His productivity was remarkable, but he looked like death, hollow-eyed and gaunt. Work didn't help. Nothing helped, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Natalie, saw her face when she told him she loved him, saw her tears as she begged him to believe her, saw the devastation in her expression when he told her to leave. The intervention for weeks after the confrontation, Victoria showed up at Damien's office unannounced. His assistant tried to stop her, but Victoria pushed past with the determination of a mother who'd watched her son suffer long enough. "We need to talk," she announced, closing his office door firmly behind her. Damien didn't look up from his computer. "I don't have anything to say to you." "Then listen." Victoria sat in the chair across from his desk, her expression resolute despite the guilt in her eyes. "I made a terrible mistake hiring Natalie. I know that now. I thought I was helping you, giving you a chance to feel again. Instead, I created this mess. Glad you finally figured that out," Damien said coldly. "But," Victoria continued, undeterred, "I'm not sorry you met her." That got his attention. He finally looked up, anger flashing in his eyes. "You're not sorry?" "No." Victoria leaned forward. "Because for 2 months, I watched my son come back to life. I saw you smile again, laugh again, look forward to something besides spreadsheets. You were happy, Damien. Really, genuinely happy. And I'll never regret giving that to you, even if it started wrong." "It was all fake," Damien said, his voice tight. "Was it?" Victoria challenged. "Because I saw Natalie with you. I watched the way she looked at you, the way she listened when you spoke, the way her entire face lit up in your presence. That wasn't fake, Damien. That was a woman desperately in love and terrified of losing you." Damien's hands clenched on his desk. "She lied to me about everything. She lied about how you met. Everything else was real." Victoria's voice softened. "I know you're hurt. You have every right to be furious. But don't throw away something genuine, because the beginning was messy." "Messy?" Damien laughed bitterly. "Mom, she was hired to manipulate me. How do I trust anything after that? The same way she trusted you," Victoria said quietly. "By taking a leap of faith, by believing that love, real love, is worth the risk." After Victoria left, Damien sat alone in his office, staring at nothing. For the first time in weeks, he let himself actually think about Natalie instead of just working to forget her. He thought about the way she'd quoted Camus in that bookstore, the genuine passion in her voice, the way she'd stood before that abstract painting and talked about chaos and order, the way she'd held his hand in the hospital, her concern absolutely authentic, the way she'd cried in his study, desperately trying to make him understand. Had that all been performance? Or had Victoria been right? Had Natalie genuinely fallen for him, despite the assignment? The search 3 days later, Damien made a decision. He needed to know, needed to hear from Natalie herself, without anger or alcohol clouding his judgment, needed to look in her eyes and ask one simple question: was any of it real? He hired a private investigator to find her. It took a week. When the report came back, Damien stared at the address with a mix of emotions he couldn't quite name. Natalie Brooks had taken a job as a night clerk at a convenience store in a rough neighborhood. She'd moved to a studio apartment that rented month to month. She'd withdrawn completely from her previous life, living like someone who wanted to disappear. That told him something. If she'd been purely mercenary, she would have taken Victoria's money and moved on to her next assignment. Instead, she'd quit, isolated herself, was working a minimum wage job that was clearly beneath her intelligence. Unless that was just more manipulation. Unless she'd known he might look for her. Damien's head spun with possibilities, but there was only one way to know for certain. At 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, he walked into the convenience store where Natalie worked. It was nearly empty, fluorescent lights harsh against cracked linoleum floors, and there she was behind the counter, wearing a faded uniform polo, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked exhausted, thinner. The light in her green eyes had dimmed. But when she looked up and saw him, something sparked. Hope or fear, or both. "Damien," she whispered, like his name was a prayer or a curse. "We need to talk," he said. The truth. Finalithis sat in his car parked outside the convenience store, the engine running for warmth against the December cold. Neither spoke for a long moment, the silence heavy with everything unsaid. "How did you find me?" Natalie finally asked. "Does it matter?" "I don't know." She turned to look at him. Really look at him. "Why are you here?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you," Damien admitted, his voice raw. "Because I've replayed every conversation, every moment, trying to separate the truth from the performance. And I can't figure it out. So I need you to tell me, honestly, with no manipulation, was any of it real?" Natalie's eyes filled with tears. All of it was real. Everything that mattered. When? Damien pressed. "When did it stop being an assignment and become real?" "That night by the water, when you told me about Charlotte." The words came out thick with emotion. "That's when I knew I was in real trouble. Because I wasn't acting anymore. I was just me, falling for someone I had no right to fall for." "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Because I was terrified," Natalie said simply. "Because telling you meant losing you, and I wasn't ready to lose you. So I kept lying to myself that somehow I could fix it, that somehow we could survive the truth about how we met." Damien was quiet, processing. "My mother said she saw you fall in love with me, that it was obvious. Your mother is perceptive." A sad smile crossed Natalie's face. "She's also the reason we're in this mess." She meant well. Does that make it better or worse? "I honestly don't know." Damien ran his hands through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. "Natalie, what you did was wrong. Taking money to manipulate someone's emotions, that's indefensible. I know, but..." He took a shaky breath. "I've been thinking about something, about authenticity and performance, and where the line actually is." Natalie waited, hardly daring to breathe. "You researched me, yes. You orchestrated our meetings. You became the kind of woman I'd be attracted to. All of that is true." Damien turned to face her fully. "But here's what I keep coming back to. The woman you became. Was that a character you created? Or was it you finally letting yourself be seen?" Natalie's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Damien chose his words carefully, "that maybe you didn't create someone for me to love. Maybe you just removed the walls you usually hide behind. Maybe the performance wasn't becoming someone else. It was finally becoming yourself." Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks. "I don't know if that makes it better or worse." "Neither do I." Damien reached out, wiped her tears with his thumb. "But I know I miss you. I know that losing you hurts worse than Charlotte's betrayal ever did. And I know that I'd rather risk being hurt again than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." "What are you saying?" Natalie repeated, hope beginning to bloom in her chest like something fragile and dangerous. "I'm saying I want to try again. For real this time. Not as the people we performed for each other, but as who we actually are. Messy, broken, complicated." He took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "I want to know the real Natalie Brooks. The woman who survived foster care and built a life from nothing. The woman who works night shifts because she needed to disappear. The woman who fell in love with me, despite every reason not to. And I want to know the real you," Natalie whispered. "Not the CEO who has everything together, but the man who still grieves, the man who's terrified, but choosing to be brave anyway. Damien pulled her closer, and for the first time in weeks, something in both their chests unclenched. Where do we start? Natalie asked, with honesty. Complete, brutal honesty. His eyes held hers. No more performance. No more carefully constructed versions of ourselves. Just the truth, even when it's ugly or uncomfortable. I can do that. Natalie's voice shook. I'm scared, but I want to try. Good. Damien smiled, and it was small and tentative but real. Then here's my first truth. I love you, Natalie Brooks. I loved who I thought you were, and I think I'll love who you actually are even more. But I need time. I need us to rebuild this from the foundation up. How do we do that? We start with a date, a real one where we tell each other embarrassing stories and reveal our worst habits and figure out if we actually fit when we're not trying to impress each other. Natalie laughed through her tears. When? When do you get off work? 7 in the morning. Then I'll pick you up at 7. We'll get breakfast somewhere terrible, drink too much coffee, and start learning who we are when we're not pretending. They sat there in the car, holding each other in the harsh glow of the convenience store parking lot lights. To broken people deciding to risk everything one more time. Thank you, Natalie whispered, for giving me another chance. Thank you, Damien replied, for being brave enough to fall in love with me in the first place. Even if it was complicated, the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be hard conversations and moments of doubt and setbacks. But as they sat there together, choosing each other despite everything, both felt something they hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Real. Terrifying. Beautiful hope. And sometimes, that's where the best love stories actually begin.